Picture this. You wake up, pour your coffee, and your electricity meter is already running backward. Not because you spent 30 grand on a roof installation, not because a solar company spent 3 days drilling through your attic, because last Saturday afternoon you hung a panel off your balcony railing, ran a cable through a window gap, and plugged it into a standard wall outlet. That is it. That is the whole installation. And for the better part of a decade, 47 American states said that was illegal. What changed is not a new law, not a government program, and not a breakthrough in solar technology. It is a single piece of silicon about the size of a deck of cards that made the whole thing safe enough that regulators could no longer justify keeping it banned. We are going to cover exactly how that device works, why it was the missing piece for 10 years, and what it actually does to your power bill compared to a system that costs 40 times more. Here is what nobody explains clearly. The ban was never about the solar panel itself. Panels are just glass and silicon sitting in the sun. The ban was about what happens when you connect raw solar output to a home that is already connected to the grid. And to understand why that was ever a problem and why it is completely solved now, you have to understand what your wall outlet is actually doing every second of every day. Your home runs on alternating current. The voltage in every outlet swings back and forth 60 times per second in a precise, clean wave, locked to every other outlet on the grid. Every appliance you own, your refrigerator, your television, your phone charger, assumes that wave is there, steady and predictable. Solar panels do not produce that. A bare panel produces direct current at whatever voltage the sun happens to be delivering at that exact moment, bouncing around with every passing cloud and every shift in angle. If you wired one straight into your outlet without anything in between, you would be feeding chaotic direct current backward into a system built entirely around 60 Hz alternating current. The result on older infrastructure is not just a tripped breaker. It is a fire hazard, and in some configurations, it is a lethal one. That is the actual physics reason plug-in solar was ever banned. Not conspiracy, not greed alone, not a secret boardroom decision. Genuinely dangerous electrical engineering with the technology available in the 1990s. The piece of hardware that solved the entire problem fits in the palm of your hand and bolts to the back of the panel. It is called a microinverter. What it does in roughly 3 milliseconds is read the exact phase of your grid signal coming in through the outlet, lock onto it with precision down to fractions of a degree, and force the panel's output to mirror it perfectly. Voltage matched, frequency matched, phase angle synchronized to the third decimal place. The grid cannot distinguish the panel's contribution from anything else on that circuit. It just sees one of your outlets drawing slightly less current than it used to. That is the only change the grid ever detects. The engineering term for how this works is grid-following inverter logic. The microinverter is a follower, never a leader. It cannot push harder than the grid pulls. It cannot generate voltage on its own. It reads the grid signal, copies it exactly, and fills in the gap between what you are drawing and what the utility is supplying. If the grid disappears for any reason, storm damage, equipment failure, anything, the inverter shuts itself off in about 15 milliseconds. That is faster than a single heartbeat. That shutdown behavior has a formal name: anti-islanding. It is the reason a line worker repairing a downed wire 2 blocks away cannot be electrocuted by your panel. The moment the grid goes dead, every certified plug-in inverter on that street goes dead with it. Automatically, instantly, by law. The technology to do all of that cheaply and reliably did not exist until around 2014. Before 2014, utilities had a legitimate engineering argument for keeping plug-in solar off the market. After 2014, that argument evaporated. What replaced it was something far less technical. Every state regulates electricity through a public utility commission. Every public utility commission is lobbied aggressively by the utilities it is supposed to regulate. And every utility in America has a very straightforward financial interest in one specific outcome. You cannot generate your own electricity. Every kilowatt hour you produce yourself is one they do not sell you. Net metering, like the rule that credits you for power you push back onto the grid, took 30 years of state-by-state legal fights to get passed. And it does not even apply to plug-in solar, because plug-in solar is not trying to push power backward. It is trying to offset what you would otherwise pull from the grid in real time, inside your own home, before the current even reaches the meter. The utilities understood that distinction clearly. They blocked plug-in solar anyway, because any precedent of household generation that bypasses their billing system is a precedent they wanted gone before it could spread. The lobbying playbook ran on 3 claims. Each one was defensible for a specific window of time and then kept getting repeated long after the window had closed. Claim 1: untrained homeowners would backfeed dangerous voltage onto the grid. Anti-islanding hardware made that argument obsolete in 2014. Utilities kept making it through 2024. Claim 2: utility transformers could not handle reverse power flow. True for some aging neighborhood equipment in some specific configurations, false as a blanket statement for plug-in kits that produce so little output relative to household consumption that almost none of it ever reaches the transformer. Homes consume what they generate in real time on the same circuit before the power goes anywhere near the utility's infrastructure. Claim 3: homeowner insurance would not cover unpermitted solar connections. True until the UL 3700 safety standard was finalized. False after it. The lobby ran hard on the gap between when the technology became genuinely safe and when the regulations were forced to admit it. Germany did not wait for that gap to close on its own. By 2017, the German Electrical Safety Authority had certified plug-in solar as a recognized household appliance category. By 2018, you could walk into a hardware store in Berlin, buy a €600 kit, hang it off your apartment balcony, run the plug through the sliding door, and start offsetting your electricity bill that same afternoon. No permit, no licensed electrician, no utility notification, no inspector, nothing. They called it the Balkonkraftwerk, the balcony power plant, and it spread like a hardware trend. By the end of 2024, over 1.5 million German households had one running. In Munich, new apartment buildings now come pre-wired with dedicated balcony solar circuits, the same way American apartments come pre-wired for cable television. That is how normalized it became in under 7 years. Germany was not alone. The Netherlands moved in 2017, Austria in 2019, Spain in 2021, Portugal, Italy, Switzerland, and Belgium followed. By 2024, nearly every Western European country had a straightforward legal pathway for residential plug-in kits. Australia legalized them in 2023. Japan had grid-tied plug-in solar running since 2019. The United States, as of early 2025, was the largest developed economy on Earth where plugging a 600-watt panel into a wall outlet still required a building permit and a licensed electrician in most states. That is the actual regulatory map. As it stood going into the year, this law started changing. What finally broke it open was UL 3700. The formal safety certification standard for plug-in solar inverters finalized in 2024. Once that standard existed, utilities could no longer credibly argue the hardware was dangerous. The legal arguments became harder to sustain. Lawsuits got harder to win. Utah moved first in 2025, carving out an exemption for systems up to 1,200 watts. Maine signed its bill in April 2026. Virginia followed weeks later, becoming state number 3. Colorado and Maryland have legislation sitting on the governor's desk as of right now. Around 30 more states have bills at various stages of the pipeline. The dam is broken. Within 18 months, plug-in solar will be legal across most of the country. That is not speculation. That is the current legislative tracker. So now let's talk about what a $500 kit actually does to your power bill, because this is where the numbers get genuinely interesting and where most people discover the comparison they were never supposed to make. A typical plug-in kit on the market in 2026 includes 1 or 2 monocrystalline panels, a micro inverter already attached, a mounting bracket for a railing or a south-facing wall, and a power cable that ends in a standard household plug. Total legal output is capped at 1,200 watts under the new state laws, but most consumer kits land around 600 to 800 watts. That cap is not arbitrary. A standard 15-amp household circuit running at 120 volts has a ceiling of 1800 watts before the breaker trips. 1200 is the number that fits comfortably inside any residential circuit without any electrical modifications whatsoever. At full sun, a kit in that range produces somewhere between 3 and 6 kilowatt hours per day, depending on your latitude, your mounting angle, your local shading, and the time of year. Across a full year, you are looking at roughly 900 to 2200 kilowatt hours of electricity you did not have to purchase from the grid. Translate that into dollars at the national average residential rate of about 17 cents per kilowatt hour, and a middle-of-the-road 1600 kilowatt hours per year saves you around $270 annually. On a $500 kit, that is a payback period of roughly 2 years. 2 years. After that point, the savings are pure. Every year for the next 23 years, the panels are warranted to keep producing within 10% of their original output. The math over the life of the system is not close. Now stack that against a traditional rooftop installation. A full residential solar system runs between $20,000 and $35,000 before tax credits in 2026. Payback periods on those systems typically land between 8 and 12 years. Per dollar invested, the plug-in kit pays back 4 to 6 times faster than the roof installation. And the reason is not the hardware. The hardware is the same. The same silicon wafers, the same monocrystalline cells, the same basic panel construction going into both systems. The price gap is everything else. No structural roof penetrations, no custom aluminum racking, no licensed electrician billing at $90 an hour, no permit applications, no utility interconnection paperwork, no inspector who schedules 3 weeks out and shows up once. Every cost that disappears from the plug-in kit is a middleman the panel never needed in the first place. The 40-to-1 price gap between a plug-in kit and a full roof system has nothing to do with the solar technology. It has everything to do with the installation industry that grew up around a regulatory framework designed to require it. Here is what the kit does not do, and being direct about this matters. A 600-watt plug-in system will not run your central air conditioner. It will not power a stove, a dryer, or an electric water heater. It will not get you off the grid, and it will not keep your lights on during a power outage, because the instant the grid drops, the microinverter shuts off automatically. There is no battery. There is no storage. When clouds roll through, your savings pause until they pass. When the sun goes down, you pull from the grid exactly the way you always have. What it does is quietly eliminate the baseline draw. Your refrigerator running 24 hours a day, every device in the house idling in standby mode, pulling phantom load around the clock, the router and modem that never turn off, the cable box, the smart speakers, the garage door opener blinking on the wall. During daylight hours, that entire invisible layer of continuous consumption shifts off the grid and onto your panel. The meter barely moves. Multiply that across every daylight hour of every day for 25 years, and that is the actual financial case for a plug-in kit. Not dramatic energy independence, just a steady, invisible reduction in what you owe at the end of every month. From a device that took 15 minutes to install with a screwdriver. The most common mistake people make going into this is buying more panel than their circuit can absorb. A 2,000-watt kit sounds like twice the value of a 1,000-watt kit until you realize the breaker on a standard circuit will not let you use it. The 1,200-watt legal cap protects you from that mistake as much as it protects the grid. Stay under it, and you are in appliance territory. Go above it, and you are back in permit territory, which means an electrician, which means the entire cost structure that made the plug-in kit attractive in the first place is gone. The second mistake is mounting the panel flat against a vertical wall. A panel mounted dead vertical captures roughly 60% of what the same panel would capture at the optimal tilt for your latitude. For most of the continental United States, that angle is somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees off vertical. Every plug-in kit ships with an adjustable bracket for exactly this reason. The 15 minutes it takes to set that angle correctly is worth roughly $200 in additional output over the life of the system. And before you order anything, pull out your phone compass and check which direction your available wall or balcony faces. South-facing captures the most total sunlight across the full arc of the day. East captures the morning peak. West captures the afternoon. North-facing in the northern hemisphere means the panel spends most of its life in shade and the math falls apart entirely. 30 seconds with a compass determines whether a plug-in kit makes financial sense for your specific space. The installation in a legal state takes about 15 minutes. You mount the bracket, hang the panel, feed the cable through a window gap or a vent, and plug it in. The microinverter reads the grid signal and locks on in about 3 seconds. Your meter starts slowing down. That is the entire process. No utility call required, no permit to file, no inspector to schedule. Under the new state laws, this is classified as a household appliance purchase. The utility treats it the same way they treat you upgrading to an energy-efficient washing machine. Your meter handles the accounting automatically, ticking up when you pull from the grid, standing still when you do not. 1.5 million German households spent the last 7 years cutting their power bills with a hardware store box, while the same hardware sat on American shelves, legally prohibited in most states for reasons that stopped being about physics in 2014. The technology was ready a decade ago. The safety case has been airtight for 2 years. The only thing that stood between 1 million American households and a 2-year payback on their electricity costs was a billing model and the lobby that protected it. The rules changed. Most people just have not heard yet, and the utilities are counting on that staying true for as long as possible.